The traditional approach to national security relied on a specific geometry. Safety meant defending territory, using sovereign borders and military forces to repel physical attacks. Modern threat vectors bypass those borders entirely. A biological pathogen, a ransomware attack on an energy grid, or climate-induced crop failures do not stop at military checkpoints. To manage these modern threats, the concept of security evolved into a holistic framework known as comprehensive security. Analyzing these threats requires restructuring our baseline understanding. We have to answer two foundational questions: security for whom, and security for which values. The whom shifts away from strictly the state, focusing instead on the individual and the international system. The values expand outward from territorial safety to encompass economic welfare, physical health, and psychological well-being. This shift suggests global stability now relies on the resilience of human components within the system rather than the strength of its perimeters alone. Following the Cold War, the international system recognized that isolation was a vulnerability. Mutual survival required collective security agreements. Organizations like the United Nations, the European Union, and ASEAN developed structural mechanisms to manage these borderless, interconnected threats. Conventional diplomatic treaties and military actions fall short when protecting populations from internal or environmental vulnerabilities. The non-traditional school of thought broadens this scope, exposing a multiplicity of modern threats that span across 16 distinct domains. This chart maps the full taxonomy. It ranges from environmental and economic security to cyber and data privacy. Proactively managing these 16 domains is the primary mechanism to identify and mitigate vulnerabilities long before they trigger physical conflicts. Health security serves as a primary case study for a non-traditional threat demanding an integrated global response. It encompasses the proactive and reactive activities required to minimize the danger of acute public health events crossing international boundaries. The World Health Organization relies on a 5-part continuous loop to protect populations: prevention, detection, response, preparedness, and surveillance. In a highly mobile, interconnected world, surveillance and detection act as the critical early warning mechanisms, constantly monitoring data for unusual health events. This graph visualizes the baseline threat level, an endemic disease. This occurs when an outbreak is consistently present but limited to a specific region, making its transmission rates predictable. That predictability fractures during an epidemic, an unexpected localized spike in disease cases within a specific geographical area. The classification elevates to a pandemic when that growth becomes exponential across multiple populations. This declaration is based entirely on the mathematical spread of the virus, independent of its virology or disease severity. This mathematical shift overwhelms healthcare infrastructure, disrupts governance, and paralyzes trade. A medical event crosses a threshold, becoming a severe national security crisis. Historically, health responses were localized and reactive. Today, prevention requires a massive, coordinated global strategy. Early iterations of this approach relied on physical infrastructure to stockpile resources, like these flying vaccine banks used to prepare for localized polio outbreaks.
Yet, at the core of all international health policies is a deeply localized action: the direct physical intervention to protect an individual. Modern international cooperation relies on data sharing and mathematical modeling to predict exactly where and when to deploy these human-centric interventions globally. You cannot deploy an army to shoot a biological vector. Stopping it requires immense logistical coordination and societal trust. This human-centric approach extends directly to food security, which the UN recognizes as the most basic human need and central indicator of absolute poverty. This matrix visualizes the 1996 World Food Summit framework, which established parameters for a population to be considered secure based on 4 core factors. First is availability. This is the supply-side requirement: the physical existence of crops, fertilizers, and the functioning transport links needed to move them. Second is access, the demand-side requirement. Even if food is available, people must have the economic means to afford it and the physical safety to reach those markets. Third is use. This dictates the nutritional absorption of the food,
requiring safe preparation conditions, clean water, and fuel. The final component is stability. This acts as the cross-cutting constraint dictating whether the other three pillars can function consistently over time. Food security operates as a direct investment in wider geopolitical stability. Without it, human development halts entirely. When extreme weather or conflict compromises that central axis of stability, the entire matrix fails. In conflict zones like Gaza, localized instability instantly zeroes out both the physical access to markets and the availability of supplies. When local agricultural and economic systems collapse, large assistance programs from governments and NGOs must intervene to artificially boost availability through widespread food distributions. The immediate geopolitical fallout is mass displacement, which creates a ripple effect of regional insecurity across neighboring borders. The failure of a food system doesn't end with hunger. It actively dismantles the economic and political security of an entire region. Returning to our taxonomy chart, we can see the defining feature of comprehensive security: interconnectedness. Threats never exist in isolation. We can simulate a cascading failure starting with a single hazard in environmental security, like an extreme climate event. By altering weather patterns and destroying crops, that environmental trigger directly causes a failure in food security. That localized food shortage extends outward, driving inflation and unemployment in the economic security domain, which in turn fuels conflict and migration under political security. Leaving a single non-traditional vulnerability unaddressed creates a threat multiplier effect, capable of triggering systemic collapse across borders. The traditional military paradigm was inherently reactive, responding to attacks after they occurred. The modern framework demands a strict preventive focus. Mitigating all of these cascading risks requires deep collaboration across governments, civil society, international organizations, and the private sector. The primary objective is to identify and address non-traditional risks long before they escalate into physical crises. This framework prioritizes the safety, dignity, and development of individuals over the mere preservation of territorial lines. True security in the modern world is defined by resilience, adaptation, and a multidimensional defense of all domains of human life.